What's up, Sterile Processing Universe? It's Hank Balch here from Beyond Clean. Thank you for tuning in to this video, even if it's a video with maybe not a lot of good news, but it should be news that's not surprising. The topic of this video is where did all the technicians go sterile processing staffing in crisis? And I don't have to tell you that the whole world today is short staffed. You can see it at the restaurants, at the fast food places, at the movies, anywhere. Everyone is looking for people. If you've been in the sterile processing industry long enough, this isn't really new. We've always struggled to find the kinds of folks that make great sterile processing technicians. I'm going to talk a little bit about pipelines here in a moment because I think that has a large part to play in any solution for solving the crisis. But first, let's answer, where did the people go? Now, one of the debates or the conversations in the industry over the last couple of years has been our competitive wages. We're just not getting paid enough as frontline sterile processing technicians. And because we have not been paid enough for a while, over the last number of years, many folks have just exited the industry completely. I'm sure all of you know someone who might have started with you, got hired around the same time, went through the training program, stayed maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months, or even 24 months. But eventually, they found another job, maybe at Amazon. A lot of folks I'm seeing are quitting sterile processing day and going to work for Amazon or for the hardware store that opened across the street that pays just as much but doesn't require call or weekends, or if you mess up in your job, you don't kill somebody. All of that has led to folks over time deciding to voluntarily exit the sterile processing industry. And there's lots of other reasons. Folks use sterile processing oftentimes as a way to get their foot in the door in healthcare. So they'll start in sterile processing at the same time they're going to nursing school, or they're going to surgical tech school, or radiology, all kinds of different places that they see as kind of a step up out of sterile processing. Whatever the reasons being, long before any pandemic or kind of wide scale crisis in staffing, we have struggled to retain people in sterile processing. However, because those struggles are already there and the compensation challenges were already existent prior to the pandemic, when the pandemic hit, everyone else started experiencing that squeeze. It became that much more competitive out there in the marketplace. So now folks are paying even more competitive than they already were for these sterile processing roles. So now you can get jobs that have even better benefits, even sweeter schedules than you could in sterile processing. And so more and more folks are going out who are already in sterile processing. That's number one. So we're losing them after we've already got them, hired them, trained them. They're going out for all those reasons that I just mentioned. Number two, and this is the pipeline piece. We have struggled historically in our industry to develop and cultivate and maintain good pipelines of staff coming in. So knowing that we lose folks regularly, it's critical for any successful department and health system to have a stable recruiting and training pipeline for constantly bringing fresh technicians into the department, and not just any old person off the street. I've got a comment about that, but primarily if we can get folks who already got some kind of baseline level of training or experience. Now, that's kind of asking a lot, and I say it that way to say I am a example of someone who got hired into sterile processing right off the street. I wasn't I wasn't certified, obviously, because I've never worked in sterile processing before. I didn't have an externship. I didn't go to a training school or program. I was working at Walmart as a second shift stalker, not a stalker, stalker. I was putting stuff on the shelf off of the truck. All right. That's what I was doing before I got my sterile processing job. No medical background whatsoever. My manager at that time, who I didn't know, gave me a chance and hired me on as a second shift sterile processing technician. And here I am today, almost 13 years later, in love with the industry, committed my life to the industry now, and it has stuck. And many of y'all have that story. You didn't come from a medical background, you didn't go to sterile processing school, you were hired in off the street. So I still think that's a valid option. It's a difficult option because if you're hiring in someone with zero experience, that means you need to have some kind of stabilized training program and curriculum to onboard those folks. I was very lucky and had some good trainers, and the trainers had time to train me as I started, and we developed the same kinds of programs as I became manager and director at various health systems, but that has to be in place for that off the street hiring dynamic to work. Because what you don't want to happen is hire someone off the street, zero experience, throw them with a random technician who maybe has some years experience but is not a good trainer, doesn't want to be a trainer, has no curriculum, has no structure. And what happens? That technician gets trained halfway, and there's a lot of questions that weren't answered. There's a lot of processes that they don't know the why behind, and then they end up in a scenario of making decisions or making steps and processes that are not compliant and are not safe. And so you end up with those gaps, and that can go on for many years until someone finally realizes, this person was not trained appropriately. On the other side, if you can develop and cultivate a pipeline that is being fed in from a school, from a training program, even a vocational high school. We're seeing more and more out there today for these healthcare career high schools that have a sterile processing program. You can do the book work, you can do some hands-on through their junior and senior year. And then by the time they graduate high school, they've got some basic understanding and skill set to come into your department in a much higher capacity of competency than just someone random off the street. So that's one way to build that pipeline of people. However, you still need to have people going into those programs. You still need to have people signing up to go through the training school or to go to that high school and say, yeah, I want to do sterile processing. So that kind of leads us back to that earlier point. We've got to develop an industry, a culture, and an economic structure that makes staying in sterile processing worth the time and the effort and the commitment to want to stay. So where did all the technicians go? Well, they're leaving for various reasons, to take higher paying jobs, to take less stress jobs, to take more flexible jobs, and they're not being replaced at a high level because we don't have enough of these structured training pipelines to come in, or because our own departments don't have the structure in place and the competency, the staffing and support to train on the job. We don't have enough educators. Shout out to you educators out there. Like, you're probably like, oh yeah, Hank, you get us. We don't have enough time. I think your role, in particular educators, is like way overwhelmed. There's way too many expectations on these educators to do all the competency and all the training and all the documentation and all the onboarding for an entire department, even a smaller size department of 20 or 30. That's a lot. But I talk to educators on a regular basis, have like 35, 40, 50 technicians, have multiple locations, and They're responsible for all the education. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Plus, you get pulled into all these other side projects, etc. No wonder our training pipelines and structures and competencies are so challenged and thin in our industry. So it is an industry in crisis. It's a problem even more so than the fast food place down the street who can't find enough people to work. It's a valuable job that has dignity in its own right. However, our challenges in sterile processing are just multiplied because of the complexity, because of the skill set, because of the pay challenges. It's really a scary and hard situation, and I do not um, I'm not surprised to hear from as many of you as we do that you just have not found a way to overcome that challenge. Interim staffing has helped some of us, and I've got a couple of videos out there here recently about just the crazy money that folks can make as sterile processing travelers. But again, in this scenario, where have all the technicians gone? Well, many of them have gone into interim staffing roles because they can make so much more money, which just makes our staffing crisis that much worse. And I don't want to blame them, for taking an opportunity, because that's really, it's not them at fault. It's the industry at fault. It's all these other issues that we've discussed. But the reality is we are in crisis. We must have pipelines built to feed in these new technicians and have some level of training and experience, or if not, we have to invest the resources in our own departments to give multiple educators, to give preceptors a full 90 days at least, right, of dedicated training, and not expect our preceptors and our educators to be able to work a full-time productive shift and be training multiple new technicians at one time. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So not a lot of good news, not a lot of solutions on this video, but I want to have this conversation out in the open, and hopefully some administrators will hear this and be like, okay, yeah, we're probably asking too much of our single educator, or this is probably why our department manager is struggling and we can't solve this staffing crisis. I think part of it has to do with that pay rate and with not investing enough in the staffing and in the recruitment flexibility. Like, where are the sign-on bonuses for sterile processing techs? We need more of those. Where are the retention bonuses for sterile processing techs? We need more of those. It's not all about the money, but it's also not all about everything except for the money. If you have any other ideas or perspectives or some best practices that have helped your department overcome the staffing crisis, I want to hear them in the comment section below, or you can email me at hank@beyondclean, and we can continue the conversation offline. Hang in there, folks. We're doing everything that we can at Beyond Clean to help educate the industry and the technicians out there to fight dirty every instrument, every time. Until next time, see you later.